up a minute. What's this for? Come. Give me the word in. Order! Order! I say to the honourable gentleman, give me this. I will not tolerate such behaviour. If you want to go out now, but if you stand again, I will order you out. Make your mind up. Either shut up and get out.
The chamber was loud, the cameras were rolling, and then it happened. In a single, brutal exchange, Keir Starmer lost control of the room, and the moment went viral before he even had time to respond. What unfolded live on television was not just a clash of words. It was a public humiliation that shook Westminster to its core. What viewers witnessed live was something no Prime Minister ever wants attached to their leadership. This was not a routine parliamentary argument. This was a vicious, sustained confrontation that stripped away composure, authority and control. All in real time, the clash began like many others. Sharp questions, rising tension, a chamber already restless, but within moments, the tone shifted. An opposition figure pressed harder than expected, cutting directly into Starmer's weakest points. There was no warm-up, no polite framing, just a direct, relentless attack that landed blow after blow. Starmer tried to respond calmly at first. He leaned on prepared lines, familiar phrases, and controlled language. But the pressure did not ease. Instead, it intensified. Each response was immediately challenged. Each deflection was exposed. The chamber reacted instantly. Laughter, shouts, audible gasps. This was the moment things slipped. The Prime Minister hesitated just briefly, but in politics, seconds matter. That pause was seized upon. The attacker moved in again, sharper, louder, more aggressive. The exchange stopped being about policy and became about credibility, about competence, about whether the man at the dispatch box truly had command of the room, and the room answered for him. MPs jeered. Allies stayed silent. Even neutral faces showed discomfort. Cameras caught it all. The tightened jaw, the forced smile, the eyes scanning for support that didn't come. This wasn't just a bad moment, it was exposure. Live television makes moments permanent. Within seconds, clips were being shared. Captions wrote themselves. Starmer crushed. Starmer humiliated. Starmer loses control. The narrative formed instantly, and once formed, it is almost impossible to reverse. What made this worse was the imbalance. This did not look like two equals trading blows. It looked like a leader being cornered. Every attempt to regain footing was cut off. Every defence was turned into another opening for attack. The chamber fed off it. Parliament can sense weakness. When it does, it becomes unforgiving. The noise grew. The pressure mounted. And Starmer's authority, the invisible force that holds a Prime Minister above the chaos, visibly drained away. This is what separates a tough debate from a humiliation. A tough debate challenges ideas. Humiliation challenges standing. And today, Starmer's standing took a hit that will not fade easily. His team will argue this was one exchange, one bad moment, one hostile opponent. But politics does not work on technicalities. It works on perception. And the perception now circulating is brutal. A Prime Minister overwhelmed on the biggest stage, unable to shut down a direct assault. That perception is dangerous because leadership depends on confidence. Not just public confidence, but internal confidence. MPs must believe their leader can dominate the chamber, not be dominated by it. When that belief cracks, discipline weakens and doubt spread fast. The most damaging part is that this humiliation was not private, it was not leaked, it was not spun, it was live. No editing, no correction, no second take, just raw political damage broadcast to the entire country. And as the session moved on, the damage did not fade, it lingered. Every later word Starmer spoke was filtered through that moment. Every response sounded weaker because of what had already happened. The authority he walked in with was not the authority he walked out with. This is how leadership crises begin. Not with resignations, not with votes, but with moments where a leader is seen unmistakably losing control. And today, millions watched that moment unfold. As the exchange ended, the damage did not stop with the final word. In many ways, that was when it truly began, because humiliation in Parliament does not fade when the noise dies down. It follows a leader into every room that comes next. Inside Westminster, the atmosphere shifted immediately. MPs were no longer focused on the next question or the next vote. They were replaying what they had just seen. Who stood firm? Who faltered? Who controlled the moment? Politics is ruthless in this way. It remembers weakness and it stores it for later use. For Keir Starmer, this was not just about one opponent landing punches. It was about the chamber sensing vulnerability. And once that sense takes hold, it changes behaviour fast. Interruptions grow louder. Challenges become sharper. Respect becomes conditional. That is the hidden cost of a public clash gone wrong. Starmer's allies tried to move quickly. They spoke of context, of bad faith attacks, of hostile tactics designed to provoke. But explanations struggle to compete with images, and the image now circulating is clear. A Prime Minister visibly rattled under pressure. This matters more than policy ever could, because Parliament is not only a place of debate, it is a theatre of authority. Leaders are judged not just by what they say, but by how the room responds when they say it. Today, the room did not respond in Starmer's favour. Behind the scenes, advisors are said to be deeply concerned, not panicked, concerned. Because panic is loud, concern is quiet and strategic. It asks difficult questions. How do we reassert control? How do we prevent a repeat? How do we stop this moment from defining the narrative? Those are not easy questions to answer. The reason is simple. Starmer did not lose to a policy argument. He lost to momentum, and momentum, once lost, is hard to reclaim. The clash exposed a vulnerability opponents will now target again and again. They smelled blood. Already rivals are adjusting their tone. They are becoming bolder, less deferential, more confrontational. They know that pressure works. They saw it work live. And in politics, success is repeated until it fails. This is the danger zone. Public reaction mirrors this shift. Viewers did not see nuance. They saw dominance and submission. They saw one figure driving the exchange and another reacting to it. That simple story is powerful and it spreads fast. Supporters argue that Starmer has faced tougher moments and survived, that one exchange does not define a leader. That is true in theory, but in practice, moments like this become reference points. Every future clash is measured against it. Can he handle pressure? Can he shut down attacks? Can he command the room? Those questions are now live. The media understands this dynamic well. Coverage is already focusing less on the words spoken and more on the reaction, the laughter, the hesitation, the silence from his own benches. These details are being replayed, analysed, slowed down. Each replay deepens the impact, and while Starmer prepares his next appearance, his opponents prepare theirs. They will be sharper, faster, less restrained. They know now that disruption works, that pushing hard can knock him off balance. This is how authority erodes. Not in a single collapse, but in repeated tests that chip away at confidence. Starmer must now rebuild the image that was cracked on live television. He must reassert dominance without appearing aggressive. He must show strength without looking defensive. That is a narrow path, and it allows little room for error. The risk is that another clash comes too soon. If he stumbles again, the narrative hardens. One bad day becomes a pattern becomes a label, and labels are political poison. Right now, that danger is very real, because Parliament has seen something it cannot unsee. A Prime Minister under pressure, struggling to regain control, and once Parliament believes that, it behaves accordingly. This is not about humiliation as an insult. It is about humiliation as a signal that the balance of power in the room may be shifting, a signal that challenges will come faster and harder, and a signal that Keir Starmer's leadership is entering a far more hostile phase. The clash may be over, but the consequences are only beginning. As the footage continued to circulate, the impact moved beyond Westminster and into the wider public mood. What had started as a brutal parliamentary exchange was now becoming a defining political moment. one that people were talking about not because of policy, but because of power. And power, once questioned, is hard to restore. For many watching at home, the reaction was immediate and emotional. They did not see a complex debate. They saw a Prime Minister struggling to hold his ground. In an age of short clips and fast judgment, that perception matters more than context ever could. This is the danger of live television. There is no rewind for the moment itself, only endless replays of the damage. Every time the clip is shared, the same message is reinforced. Starmer was pushed, Starmer faltered, Starmer lost control, and repetition turns opinion into belief. Inside political circles, that belief is being quietly tested. Supporters are trying to steady the ground. They argue that aggressive tactics are designed to provoke exactly this outcome, that Starmer refused to descend into shouting, that restraint should be seen as strength, but restraint only works when it looks deliberate. Today, it looked forced. That distinction is critical. When calm appears chosen, it commands respect. When calm appears imposed by pressure, it invites further attack. Opponents understand this instinctively. They are not celebrating loudly, but they are smiling privately because they know they have found a pressure point. The next time Starmer stands at the dispatch box, the atmosphere will be different. Challenges will come faster. Interruptions will be louder. The chamber will test him again, not out of malice, but out of habit. Parliament probes weakness the way water finds cracks. It flows where resistance is lowest. That is what makes this moment so dangerous. The humiliation was not just personal, it was structural. It altered how the room relates to him. Authority in Parliament is partly earned through dominance. When that dominance is disrupted, it must be rebuilt deliberately and quickly. Media framing is accelerating this shift. Headlines focus on the clash, not the cause. On the reaction, not the argument. Analysis pieces speak of pressure mounting and control slipping. These phrases become familiar. Familiar phrases become assumptions, and assumptions shape behaviour. Within Labour ranks, discomfort is growing. MPs are not questioning leadership openly, but they are watching more closely. Loyalty in politics often depends on confidence in survival. When a leader appears vulnerable, support becomes conditional. This does not mean rebellion, it means caution. Caution shows itself in silence, in delayed reactions, in careful wording, in absence, when presence matters. These are subtle signs, but they are unmistakable to those who know the system. Starmer's inner circle understands the risk. They know that if this moment is not countered with a strong showing soon, it will define the tone of the months ahead. One poor performance can be forgiven. A second confirms the narrative. That is why the pressure is now intense. Every appearance must be controlled. Every response must be sharp. There is no margin for hesitation, because hesitation now carries memory. It recalls the moment he faltered live on camera. Public trust operates the same way. People want to believe their leaders can stand firm, saying under attack. They may not agree with them, but they want strength. When strength appears uncertain, doubt spreads fast. That doubt is now visible, not as outrage, not as anger, but as quiet questioning. And quiet questioning is more dangerous than loud opposition because it lingers. Starmer must now fight on two fronts. Against opponents who will push harder, and against a perception that has already taken root. Perceptions are stubborn. They do not respond to facts alone. They respond to moments that contradict them. He needs one of those moments, a moment where he shuts down an attack cleanly, where the chamber falls silent for the opposite reason, where confidence returns to his benches, where the image changes. Until that happens, this clash will hang over him. It will be referenced, it will be remembered, it will be replayed. This is how political wounds behave. They do not bleed constantly, they ache. And every new pressure makes them hurt again. The humiliation may have lasted minutes, but its shadow could stretch much longer. Because in politics, losing an argument is survivable. Losing the room is not. And right now, Keir Starmer is fighting to prove that the room still belongs to him. not to those who exposed his vulnerability in front of the nation. As the political world digests what happened, the long-term consequences are starting to come into focus. This was not just a bad headline cycle, it was a stress test. And many believe Keir Starmer did not pass it convincingly. Moments like this have a habit of reshaping power quietly, not through dramatic announcements or sudden resignations, but through subtle changes in behaviour, how MPs address the Prime Minister, how firmly he is challenged, how often his authority is questioned rather than assumed. These shifts do not happen overnight, but they begin with moments exactly like the ones seen live on television. Starmer now faces a credibility gap. Before the clash, critics questioned his policies. After it, they question his command. That is a far more dangerous problem. Policies can be defended, command must be demonstrated, and demonstration requires performance repeatedly under pressure without error. The chamber will not go easy on him. Opponents sense opportunity. They will frame future challenges more aggressively, more personally, more directly. They will interrupt sooner, push harder, speak over him if allowed, not because they dislike him, but because they believe it works. This is how Parliament enforces its own logic. When strength is shown, it backs off. When weakness appears, it presses in. Starmer's supporters insist this interpretation is unfair. They argue that politics should reward restraint, not theatrics, that shouting louder does not mean leading better. And in a calmer environment, that argument might hold. But Parliament is not calm, it is adversarial by design. And adversarial systems punish hesitation. What makes this especially risky is timing. Starmer is already navigating multiple pressure points: internal unity, public trust, external scrutiny. This clash adds another layer of strain. Instead of focusing forward, he is now forced to manage damage. Damage control drains energy. Every hour spent correcting perception is an hour not spent shaping narrative. Every defensive move reinforces the idea that defence is necessary. This is why humiliating moments linger. They force leaders onto the back foot. Inside Labour, strategy discussions are reportedly intensifying, not about replacing leadership, not yet, but about shielding it, about tightening messaging, about controlling exposure. These are sensible moves, but they also signal vulnerability. When a leader must be protected from the arena, questions naturally follow. Why protection is needed at all? Starmer must now decide how to respond. Does he lean into confrontation and attempt to reassert dominance that risks appearing reactive and angry? Or does he double down on calm authority and hope the moment fades? That risks reinforcing the image of passivity under fire. There is no perfect option. The only real solution is a counter moment. A performance so decisive that it overrides memory. Politics often works this way. One strong display can erase a weak one, but only if it is undeniable. Until then, this moment will continue to define discussion. Not openly, not loudly, but persistently. Voters may not follow every debate, but they understand confidence. They understand when a leader looks in control and when they don't. That instinct is powerful and it is hard to argue against. This is why the clash matters so much. It exposed a vulnerability at the worst possible time. It handed opponents a reference point and it placed Starmer under a microscope he cannot step away from. Every future appearance will be judged against this standard. Will he hesitate? Will he be interrupted? Will the room turn on him again? These questions now hover over his leadership. The humiliation itself may fade from headlines. Another story will take its place. That is how news works. But the effect will remain embedded in how power operates around him. Because in politics, authority is not something you declare. It is something others grant you or take away. And right now, Keir Starmer is in a fight, not just to lead, but to re-earn the authority that briefly slipped from his grasp in front of the nation. The next clash will matter more than the last, because it will answer the question everyone is now asking, even if they are not saying it out loud. Was that moment a one-off stumble or the beginning of something much bigger? As the dust settles, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This moment has changed the political atmosphere, not dramatically, not officially, but subtly, and subtle changes are often the most dangerous of all. Keir Starmer now leads under a shadow. It is not a scandal. It is not a resignation crisis. It is something quieter and more corrosive. Doubt. Doubt about command. Doubt about presence. Doubt about whether he can dominate the most hostile arena in British politics when the pressure peaks. That doubt did not exist in this form before the clash. Now it does. This is how political authority weakens, not with a single collapse, but with a visible crack that others begin to test, and those tests are already coming. The tone in Parliament is shifting. Questions are sharper. Interruptions are quicker. Respect is no longer automatic, but it must be earned again, moment by moment. Starmer's challenge is brutal in its simplicity. He must prove that what the nation saw was an exception, not a preview. That means no hesitation, no drifting answers, no reliance on prepared phrases. When pressure rises, Parliament will not allow it, the public will not forget it, and opponents will not stop pushing until they know the answer. Can he hold the room? Because holding the room is what leadership looks like in real time. Supporters will say this is being exaggerated, that every Prime Minister faces rough sessions, that strong leaders recover from worse, and history shows that is true, but only when recovery is decisive. Half measures do not erase moments like this. Silence does not undo them. Time alone does not heal them. Only dominance does. Until that dominance is reasserted, this humiliation remains active. It shapes coverage. It shapes behaviour. It shapes expectations. Even neutral observers now watch Starmer differently, not to hear what he says, but to see how he handles what comes at him. That shift in attention is critical. When leaders are judged on survival rather than vision, their space narrows. Every misstep feels larger. Every pause feels heavier, and every challenge carries more risk than before. This is the position Starmer finds himself in now. Not defeated, not finished, but exposed. And exposure in politics invites attack. The next parliamentary clash will not be routine. It will be framed as a test. Commentators will say it openly, viewers will sense it instinctively, opponents will exploit it deliberately. Win that moment and this story fades. Lose it and this moment becomes a pattern. That is the line he is walking. What makes this so significant is that humiliation, once public, never truly disappears. It becomes part of the political memory. It resurfaces during crises. It is referenced during debates. It is recalled when confidence wavers. This is how moments echo. Starmer still has time to change the story, but the clock is already ticking. Politics does not wait for recovery, it accelerates. And acceleration punishes hesitation more than anything else. Right now, the country is watching not for policy announcements, but for posture, for strength, for command, for evidence that the man at the top can absorb pressure without bending under it. That expectation is unforgiving, because leadership is not about never being challenged. It is about what happens when you are, and today, millions saw a challenge land hard. What happens next will define far more than a single headline. It will define whether this was a fleeting embarrassment or the moment that marked the beginning of a far deeper struggle for authority. The clash is over, but the test is just beginning, and the next time Keir Starmer steps into that chamber, the question will not be asked out loud, but everyone will be listening for the answer. Does he still control the room? Or did the room learn in one vicious exchange that he can be shaken?